Our second honoree has been called unflappable and a troublemaker. So much so that the New York Times described her new book, Make Trouble, Standing Up, Speaking Out, and Finding the Courage to Lead. I'm going to repeat that just in case you haven't gotten the book yet. Make Trouble, Standing Up, Speaking Out, and Finding the Courage to Lead. The New York Times described as a professional troublemaker's guide for young activists. And we know that it's troublemakers like her who force this country to confront injustice. A fierce fighter for women's rights, she stands on the front lines in the fight for freedom. She inspires us to be hopeful, to be vigilant, and determined. She imagines a better America, and even better, she works to make it real. So please turn your attention to the screens as we highlight our next 2018 Hubert H. Humphrey Civil and Human Rights honoree, Cecile Richards.
The Leadership Conference is proud to recognize Cecile Richards with the Hubert H. Humphrey Civil and Human Rights Award for selfless and devoted service in the cause of equality. Richards emerged as a national leader for the rights of all women during her 12-year tenure, guiding Planned Parenthood through some of its most challenging times.
A lot of folks may remember that I spent about 5 hours plus before Congress, a very hostile committee. Even though I know the purpose of that hearing was to embarrass Planned Parenthood, it actually had the opposite result, which it provided us a forum on national television to talk about the great health care we provide. We are a healthcare provider to 2.7 million people every year, making sure that every woman in this country, regardless of where she lives, regardless of her income, her immigration status, whether she's insured, can get access to health care. That's what we do at Planned Parenthood, and we're proud to do it. We've always had this magic, to me, sort of co-joining of both organizing and service delivery. And when those things come together, they're incredibly powerful. We're, of course, really honored to be part of that leadership conference. We would have never beat back the repeal of Obamacare. We would have never beat back the efforts to defund Planned Parenthood if we hadn't had a coalition of groups that stood with us, and we'll never forget it. I grew up in Dallas, Texas. My mother was sort of the original unrepentant feminist, and of course was elected the first pro-choice progressive woman governor ever of the state of Texas. And I think about her a lot. Well, I was in 7th grade. It was sort of the height of the anti-war movement. That was about the time that the national moratorium was being talked about. And this was a day of wearing black armbands in protest. And I thought, well, I think I should do that too. And of course, I was a little bit scared when the principal stopped me because I'd never met him before, but also kind of excited. And I think that's what activism is about. If you're not scaring yourself, you're probably not doing enough. And that's something I think I learned in 7th grade. Right out of college, I became a union organizer. I worked with garment workers in South Texas, women who were making the minimum wage, nursing home workers in East Texas, and then finally on the Justice for Janitors campaign in Los Angeles, where we finally earned a living wage for janitors in that city. A lot of folks that I see who don't work at Planned Parenthood and particularly who are living through this time say, how are you doing? Like, they're worried about us. You know, they think, are you holding up okay? And what they don't know is that it's actually just the opposite. I've met so many amazing people in my 12 years at Planned Parenthood, but one woman I'll never forget is a 16-year-old named Deja Fox from Arizona, because during this fight to protect access to Planned Parenthood, she not only was a patient of ours, but she went to a town hall meeting. She took on her United States Senator, Jeff Flake, in a room full of hundreds of strangers.
I'm wondering, as a Planned Parenthood patient and someone who relies on Title X, who you are clearly not, why it's your right to take away my right to access that. So if you can explain that to me, I would appreciate it.
The exciting thing to me about Deja, she'll be the first person in her family ever to go to college. That to me is what we're investing in at Planned Parenthood, is not only our patients, but in our patients as becoming leaders of this country.
Please welcome Cecile Richards.
That was lovely. Wow. Thank you. That was really beautiful and complete with like embarrassing pictures from high school. Wow. Who knew? I love the Resistance Revival Choir. That's what we need I need to listen to that every single morning. So we give it up for them. So amazing. I want to thank my good friend Vanita. I'm so incredibly proud of her. I want to thank the Leadership Conference. And I really want to shout out my sister in the struggle, Tarana Burke, for her amazing leadership. You're going to be hearing from her, and she's incredible. And of course, the Dreamers, who, if there's no other reason we're all here tonight, it's that we stand with the Dreamers every single day. So thank you. You inspire us, give us courage. So as you know, I know Vanita said earlier that the Leadership Conference was formed in 1950 with this idea that a community of groups committed to civil rights and social justice. It really started with some of the original groups like NAACP and Labor were stronger together, and obviously that's what's been proven over these last several decades. And you know, in so many things have happened. Of course, now more than 200 organizations are part of the Leadership Conference on Civil Rights. And I just wanted to mention that because when I arrived at Planned Parenthood 12 years ago, actually Planned Parenthood was not part of LCCR. And so together we set out to change that. And I just really want to shout out my friend Wade Henderson for working with me to make that happen. It was so important, incredibly important. And it really was Wade's leadership that made that possible. And we are so proud at Planned Parenthood to stand with all of our brothers and sisters as we work for social justice. And I always think if the Leadership Council didn't exist, we would all have to now create it, because it's the most important place that we all come together and fight for the things that we believe in. And I think it's important now that the Leadership Conference is not only standing in solidarity with long established organizations, but all kinds of new leaders that are coming up all across the country. And it takes on, as Vanita has said, new urgency today as we fight for, frankly, the very soul of this nation. The fundamental principles that I think represent the America we believe in and that we aspire to be, a country of diversity, of pluralism, and equality. But on the positive side, I just want to say, over these last 16 months, and I've been an organizer my whole life, we have seen that when we actually link arms and we stand together, we can beat these guys and we can achieve unbelievable things, all right? I mean, and we've seen it so many places, whether it is standing with Muslims at the airports and standing with immigrant families at the borders. These are the things we have to do. Standing with the students, teenagers who are demanding common sense gun safety laws in this country. And standing with families who are fighting for criminal justice reform so that mass incarceration is no longer used as a weapon to disenfranchise and destroy the Black community. This is perhaps the most important work that we can be doing. It means standing with working people, not only in this country, but around the globe, and the right to earn a living wage and fair working conditions. And of course, it absolutely means standing with women and LGBTQ people, people of color, and every other person for the right to bodily autonomy, all right? This is so fundamental. So, because I think it's important to remember in the historic words of Fannie Lou Hamer, nobody's free until everybody's free, and that's what we have to do. So I think this year we've proven that together, that our opponents may be in power, but they do not have the power, right? We showed that, black women showed that in Alabama, and the LGBTQ community showed that in Virginia. Progressives showed it in Wisconsin, Latinas in Texas. This is our moment to prove that right. And as Dr. King reminded us, the arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends towards justice, and together we are unstoppable. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Cecile. We will all certainly miss your leadership at Planned Parenthood, but we cannot wait to see what you do next. 2 words, just 2 words that went viral in 2017 and helped propel a movement that broke years of silence, sometimes shame, sometimes guilt, for millions of women. But the woman behind those words, her activism began long, long before that. She said, "Me too," more than a decade ago. As an expression of solidarity and as an outstretched hand to sexual assault survivors who were often alone and afraid to speak up and speak out. She said, "Me too," as a new language to cultivate a community where all women and all girls can safely share their stories and we can end sexual violence once and for all. Her powerful work has changed the narrative of a nation. It's sparked a revolution and a call to action that continues to build every single day. So please give your attention to the screens as we recognize our final 2018 Hubert H. Humphrey Civil and Human Rights Award honoree, Tarana Burke.
Tarana Burke had been on the front lines of the struggle against sexual violence for years when her Me Too campaign went viral, moving America to a place of reckoning that is long overdue. The Leadership Conference is proud to honor Tarana Burke with the Hubert H. Humphrey Civil and Human Rights Award for selfless and devoted service in the cause of equality.
To have 8 women of color on one of Hollywood's biggest nights on the red carpet talking about domestic workers, low-wage workers, sexual violence, farm workers, talking about misogyny and sexism, that was unprecedented. And because of the glitz and the glam, it doesn't feel like an action for people. But, we have to expand our thinking about what things look like. We have to have some uncommon alliances in order to move the needle forward. The Me Too movement is an initiative that I founded in 2006 while working with Black and brown girls in the South. There was rampant sexual violence happening in the community that I lived in, and it was a tool to help interrupt sexual violence while also showing those young people that healing was possible. And there was a girl who I met in one of those camps in 1996 who I just publicly call Heaven. She had been molested by her stepfather, and she was trying to tell me, and I was 22 at the time. I wanted to have something really good to say to her. I wanted to tell her something that was going to be profound and change her life and all of these things, and I could not think of anything better to say than this happened to me too. But I didn't even say that. I'm a survivor of sexual violence, of child sexual abuse, and I know what that trauma feels like, and I know what it's like to hold that and have that trauma manifest into things that people will describe as other things, right? I grew up in the Bronx. And so it was also a very pro-Black household. Like, we were extra Black. Like, we had birthday cakes on Malcolm X's birthday, and The thing I didn't have is we didn't have a gender analysis, right? There was no talk about sexual violence. There was no talk about anything dealing with women's issues or even Black women's issues. I had a nagging sense about wanting to do something around sexual violence. I have an email that I sent to my friend, and I was like, what if we called it Me Too? And she just wrote back, oh my God, that's huge. That's gonna be so big. So that's where the name itself came from. We created a MySpace page just because we thought like we need to live on the internet somewhere. And all these women came forward and started saying, Me Too. And then I developed an adult workshop. And then a men's workshop, then a parents workshop. There's so much about those two words that are so easy. It's so succinct. It tells a whole entire story, or it starts a story. And so when Alyssa Milano tweeted Me Too, she put out a general call to the world. I was overwhelmed when I first heard of it. I didn't know who did it. I didn't know where it came from. And I was really scared that this was gonna be a situation where people would, co-opt something, not knowing what it meant, not knowing that there was a body of work attached to it. But that turned around pretty quickly. So it happened on Sunday, and I think she might have reached out to me like Tuesday morning and said, I just was made aware that this exists already, blah, blah, blah. And then by Thursday, we were on Good Morning America together. 12 million people engaged with the Me Too hashtag on Facebook in 24 hours. I can't believe that we're having a sustained global dialogue around sexual violence. Hopeful is all I can be. This work is hard, and it's sad, and it can pull you down. It can feel never ending. And if I don't remain hopeful, and if I don't focus on joy on a regular basis, I feel like I will slip under. So I'm always hopeful.
Please welcome Tarana Burke.
That video got me. I wasn't ready for that. Oh, okay. Hi. Well, a lot of you here. Can't tell that from my seat over there. Oh, I honestly can't believe that I'm here. So I discovered the world of social justice and community organizing at 14 years old. I was a member of a national organization called the 21st Century Youth Leadership Movement. And that was based in Selma, Alabama. Even though I'm from the Bronx, we should get that clear. People oftentimes get that confused. BX. But it was founded by veterans of the civil rights and human rights movements, and they wanted to ensure that the legacy of work that they had started was passed down to a new generation of community leaders. And so I learned so much from those elders just by listening intently to their detailed stories. And if any of you know any civil rights veterans, you know how detailed those stories can be. But I listened at the foot and at the knee of so many of my heroes because unlike other history, so many of our folks from civil rights history are still alive. And we should continue to acknowledge them. It's so funny that this is 2018. I've been thinking about 2018 for years. It sounds odd, but as a person living in Selma and surrounded by civil rights history, I kept thinking this is the last of the 50th anniversaries, right? Once we hit Dr. King's 50th and fair housing, there aren't very many big anniversaries left, and who's gonna remember? That's just been something I've been thinking about, but look at what 2018 has done. It's almost like we have a turnover, right? Like we knew we were gonna get to this place and we had to press restart. But anyway, back to my elders. So I listened to their stories about the challenges and the triumphs they had while movement building, and they blessed me with nuggets of wisdom and life lessons that still guide my life and my work today, like the first rule of nonviolence, which is I will not violate your dignity, but I will not compromise mine. Or, yeah. Or one that I heard often from former SNCC members, which was aim big and miss small. And obviously one of my favorite is, you can't lead without serving. And these are the people that raised me in the movement and in movement work. And I also learned from their shortcomings and their short-sightedness as well. This is also the community where I first took the ideas of empowerment through empathy, and more importantly, community healing, and talking about sexual violence as a social justice issue. And so many of my elders and peers couldn't see the need to make our communities less vulnerable to sexual violence as a social justice issue. But what could be a more human right than the right to decide how and when and why and who touches your body? And it's not just an individual right. It should be of the highest priority in the communities that we live in. When people come home from drug rehab, right, they're always advised not to return to the communities where they were using, drugs, where they harmed themselves. And every time I hear that, I think about how many of us have to return to the communities where we were harmed, to the homes and churches and neighborhoods and jobs where we were harmed because we have no choice. And what it must feel like to dwell in those places and watch people fight for everything but your right to be free from sexual violence. This is the other moral reckoning we have to contend with in America. The Me Too movement was by no means the start of the fight to end sexual violence. We know that. It's a long history in this country. But it has brought it to the forefront, and it's front and center. And even with millions of survivors standing up to be counted and validating each other's existence, we are still focused on the wrong things. We are inundated with information about the accused and the perpetrators, but very little about the people who are surviving this reality every day. That is the reality of the Me Too movement. We are here to make sure the survivors aren't forgotten in this moment, and so that Black and Native and Latinx and all people of color and queer and trans and non-binary people and disabled people keep our civil and human rights front and center. And be clear, this work also can't just be couched in the women's movement, because while so many of us survivors are women, survivors are also men and otherwise identified. And so we really isolate so many people when we just say that this is a part of the women's movement. This is a survivors movement. It's a survivors movement. It's a people's movement. So now the question is, what part will you play in this reckoning? That's the question I ask everybody. Listen, everywhere I go now, because of all of the, the hoopla and the magazines and the Oscars and the whatnot, that is, I'm an old lady. We say hoopla and whatnot. And I keep repeating this even though people don't believe me, but I really don't have use for celebrity. I don't. It's not gonna serve me if it doesn't serve this cause. What I need is a commitment. I need a commitment from you all, from everyday people. I need a commitment from survivors and from allies and from advocates and for people who say that they believe in human rights, that we will ride this wave together. We can heal our communities together. It's gonna take each and every one of us doing all that we can at capacity to even move the needle. But we first have to make a commitment. What is your commitment to this work? I think one of the things that's been so powerful about this year is we've seen how we know it because we're smart people, but I think as a collective of movement people, we've been working across issue lines in ways that are very different. And so we recognize, people kept saying to me when, unfortunately, when the Parkland happened, oh, you better hurry up because, you know, the tide is going to shift to gun violence. And I was like, are we not smart enough to see how gun violence is tied to sexual violence? Right? Are we so limited in our thinking and in our capacity to move the needle and do this work that we have to pick either or? We know that all of these issues are interconnected. We know how many undocumented young people, how many undocumented people are survivors of sexual violence, and they don't come forward because they have a fear of being deported. These issues are all interconnected. And I know I'm preaching to the choir because y'all are here. But it bears repeating that we are all in this together, and we need to leave here tonight feeling like we are renewed in our commitment to this work in whatever capacity you can. We all have a role to play. I'm a fan of saying, find your lane. Find your lane. Find where you fit. Find what your contribution is, and don't let anybody else tell you that it's not worthy. Every contribution is worthy. Let's heal together, y'all. Thank you.
Thank you, Tarana Burke, for all that you do every day for all of us. And we are coming to the end of our evening, and it has been a great evening, Vanita.
Thank you. It really has been a truly wonderful night, and I think we all need to take what Tarana has told us. We do this work every day, but we need to find the fuel to recommit ourselves to the work and to the movement and to each other. Thank you all for being here. Thank you all for coming together and for all that you do every day to protect civil and human rights. Good night. And I want to ask, we're going to close out on a final performance by the Resistance Revival Chorus, and I'd like to ask all of our honorees and dreamers to come up on stage. Thank you all.
We who believe in freedom cannot rest. We who believe in freedom cannot rest until it comes. We who believe in freedom cannot rest. We who believe in freedom cannot rest until it comes. Until the killing of black men, black mothers, sons, is as important as the killing of white men, white mothers, sons. We who believe in freedom cannot rest. We who believe in freedom cannot rest until it comes. Not needing to clutch for power, not needing the light just to shine on me. I need to be just one in the number as we stand against tyranny. To me, young people come first. They have the courage where we fail. If I can just shine a light on as they carry us through the gale. We who believe in freedom cannot rest. We who believe in freedom cannot rest until it comes. I'm a woman who speaks in a voice, and I must be heard. At times I can be quite difficult. I'll bow to no man's word. We who believe in freedom cannot rest. Oh, we who believe in freedom cannot rest until. Sing it again now. We who believe in freedom cannot rest. We who believe in freedom cannot rest until it comes. We who believe in freedom, we cannot rest. 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 We who believe in freedom, we who believe in freedom cannot rest. We who believe in freedom cannot rest until it comes. We who believe in freedom cannot rest. We who believe in freedom cannot rest. We who believe we 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 cannot rest. Who we believe we cannot rest. We who believe we cannot rest.
I'm better, so much better now. I see the light, touch the light.